Hey everybody, you're watching part 2 of the CareMinds podcast episode with Falko Buttler, Senior Vice President of Engineering at Accolade. In this part 2 of the episode, Falko shares his experience of scaling the development team remotely, the definition of the WOW user experience at Accolade, the technical challenges that merge and acquisition brings, and much more. Hope you enjoy. Let's get started. I think that you've also said something that is every PM's and Scrum Master's dream, having the team to pick up on the process themselves and really understanding an inside and out. How do you think you've attributed to this particular phenomenon of that particular team having adopted this process in their teamwork? How do you, what would be your tips for PMs and Scrum Masters to implement so that the team understands that process to the fullest extent possible?
So, I mean, the PM and the Scrum Master actually need to be in close touch. So they actually need to communicate a lot. Like I've seen teams where that may not be happening, and I think that's when you get when not everyone is on the same page. So actually, yeah, meeting very frequently and talking to the team. And I think this retrospective process especially, so we do it after every sprint, so typically every 2 weeks. And I've been part of these retrospectives in the beginning quite frequently and encourage them to, like, when engineers or someone on the team was bringing up, hey, like we could do this better, or we should try this other thing, I was encouraging. It's like, yeah, let's give this a try. This is different from what another team was doing, but you identified this as a challenge. So why don't you pilot this and see how that goes? And if you feel like that is successful for your team, then let's also bubble this up and bring this up. So I have a team meeting with all my leads on the team. And that is also something we'll discuss there. And it's like, hey, this team adopted this new process. Maybe that is something for another team as well. And sometimes we go as far and say, this makes so much sense. I think all of us should do that and at least give this a try.
Mm-hmm.
Also, on a like semi-regular basis, we try to bring in someone, like especially when you're growing a lot. So like in 2020, for example, we grew the team, like more than doubled the team. So we got a lot of new talent. And then in early 2021, I believe, we brought in a Scrum trainer. Like it's an external company that came in and didn't just talk to the engineers, but also we invited product managers, designers, like everyone who was interested in learning about the process. So it was a diverse group just learning a little bit more about the process as well. Even though we've done it, now you're learning also from someone who's training this to many different companies. And then you're picking up new ideas as well. So I know there was lots of engagement after that. So that's not something we do on a like every month or so, but I think it's a good idea to also once in a while bring in someone externally just to get that external perspective as well, so that you're not just in your bubble, just thinking about how you've always done it, but also getting a perspective of how others are doing it.
This is great. Valid points. And you've mentioned that you've witnessed that process of team scaling in 2020 when COVID hit. This was full remote. It's not like remote didn't exist before, but now all of a sudden everybody just went from, working full time in the office to full remote. What would you describe the experience was like, and how do you see the modern way of efficient scaling when it comes to especially smaller companies, like say startup Series D companies that are conscious of their budgets, of their resources? How do they go about this efficiently?
Yes, I mean, prior to 2020, I also already worked with teams that were distributed. However, distributed typically means you have teams that are at different locations. However, you have like typically co-located teams. So like, for example, I used to work with teams that were in India, and I had teams in the US, and we had teams in Europe. But these were like full teams located in one location. But when 2020 came, we were actually just in the process of going, like the PlushCare, the company that got acquired by Accolade that I'm working for right now. We started in San Francisco, so in the Bay Area in California. and all the engineers were local to San Francisco. We met in the office 5 days a week, but we were just looking at expanding to different locations, and we picked Vancouver in Canada as our next location. So we were already prepared to having somewhat distributed teams, but the plan was still to build like another kind of base in Vancouver. But then when COVID hit, we said, okay, we're still focusing on the Canadian market, but it's really not important that someone needs to go to the office every day, because right now we can't anyway. So we hired a lot of people. Some of like most of them were actually in Vancouver, but others were not. And now the team has engineers in Brazil, in Argentina, in Canada, in the US, in Ukraine, and like in many different places. And I think it's what we've learned very quickly. It's actually easier when everyone is remote than if you have teams that are co-located, but now you're trying to work with another team. Because if everyone is in the same room, then yeah, communication is easy. You have whiteboards, you can draw on it, and then collaboration is somewhat easy.
Right.
But as soon as one person is not there, then actually if everyone is on Zoom and everyone is just using collaboration tools that are online, makes communication effective as well. And we've learned that. And like I've been measuring kind of productivity of my team from like pre-COVID to like during COVID and post-COVID phase. And like everyone expected it to go down because now we were distributed, the communication was harder and the tooling. But what happened is actually productivity somewhat went up because people didn't have to commute. You could reach everyone at any time, like with some limits, as obviously someone needs to be available, but you were not limited by the office location or the room you're in or the floor on the building you're in. And there are now really good tooling, like whether it's GitHub for source code control or Jira or like many, or like things like Zoom that, I mean, there were video conferencing solutions before, but they were not really fully adopted yet. It's actually, especially in engineering, where it's mostly knowledge based, and there's a lot of written documentation or communication anyway. It really lends itself to work well with fully distributed teams, and yeah, we've embraced it, and and it's working incredibly well. And I wouldn't have thought this prior to 2020. If you would have asked me in 2019, I would probably be a believer and say, like, I think people need to be together in a room, but
Right.
definitely changed my opinion on that.
Very interesting observations. Yeah, indeed. And exploring the topic of virtual care space, I know that PlushCare and now Accolade is dabbing into that. You like the Accolade LinkedIn page, I believe, says the wow factor when it comes to the virtual care aspect. How do you define that wow factor? What do you put into that term?
Yes, so we call it wow experience. And essentially what that means is we want to provide the best possible experience for the user. And this has been part of kind of the culture from the very beginning. So we don't just want to provide you with healthcare. We want you to really have an absolute phenomenal experience while you're going through your healthcare journey. And typically when you're thinking of healthcare journey, you don't think of great things, like you're sick, you may have the flu, you feel miserable. So the worst that could happen in that situation is that you're now treated unfairly, or you have to wait a long time, you're not getting the treatment you want, and we like making it really complicated for you to use. But unfortunately, that is the common scenario that you experience, at least in the US, with the current healthcare system. So we were really about trying to change that. And that really starts from like everything we do, we're looking at like, how can we make this as pleasant for you as possible? How can we take steps out of the process for you? How can we give you like the white glove service? Like kind of really the goal was for you to have like a private concierge for you who's doing everything that you could think of when it comes to health, but not having to pay what you would have to pay for that. And now we actually expanded that beyond just the primary care and mental health services that PlushCare provides, But really now we use this for all of that Accolade provides, whether it's on the advocacy side, where we provide guidance for you to find the right care, or on the like providing an expert medical opinion if you have like a somewhat severe diagnosis or care. We're really, and also it's not just for the patient or the consumer, but it's for everyone we interact with. And that includes the employee. So we're actually measuring employee NPS because we want to provide a wow experience for all the employees at the organization. We want to provide a wow experience for the buyers because Accolade is in an enterprise business. So you now have a health plan or an employer buying the services for their employees, whether it is, or whether it's the member or the patient. So, and that starts with kind of the points I mentioned earlier, kind of great design, like ease of use, making things as simple as possible, and also giving you access to the data and kind of really helping you along the way when you're running into a problem.
Mm-hmm. Good points. And also during the acquisition process, you were accomplishing a successful merge into the existing code base of an enterprise company from a smaller company. A very interesting challenge. What are your experiences on that? What would you suggest? Maybe like a person who leads that particular task. It might be a PM. It might be a technical PM. What would you suggest to these people? Kind of like check mark first before this transition happens?
Yeah, like given that I've gone through multiple of these transitions and seeing things that work and don't work, I feel what's important is before you try to integrate products, to fully understand both your existing product as well as the product and the company that was acquired, and see how they actually fit together, and then really give it time to build trust between these two groups, to give these teams time to understand like the tech stack from the other team on the product side, to understand what functionality does exist in these different tools. Maybe where do they overlap? How could this be combined in the best way? Really truly understand the use cases and how that could work. And then expect this integration to take time. Like I think one common mistake I see is when that is tried to be rushed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and the company is acquired, and now you want to either to your shareholders or to your customers, you want, hey, like we acquired this and we're getting this into the product as fast as we can. Often that leads to the exact opposite. Then like these teams don't really know each other yet. The product isn't fully understood, and now you end up with something that is like hard to maintain. It takes a lot longer than you think it does, and people are really unhappy going through that process as well. So I think what we've done with the Plashka and Accolade acquisition is, for the first like 12 months or so, really we continued on our independent roadmap, but during that time have lots of check-ins with the different groups within the organization to better understand each other, the teams, the product, and then come up with a thoughtful approach of how we can integrate this. And we did launch the first integrated solution in January of this year, and it was a huge success, and it was still stressful, and it was a huge project and quite a bit of an undertaking. But given that there was trust built and thought put into all of this process, it was very successful. And I think that's how you really need to think about it. And like for full integration, it's still a long way. But like if you take a thoughtful approach and give the teams time to understand each other, then it's going to be, or the chance of it being successful is a lot higher.
Yeah. Falko, what appealed to me is your take on how bigger organizations now understand that with the acquisition, it's very important to let those smaller teams breathe. In other words, don't enforce their kind of like policy and the way they work on the smaller team, preserving that flexibility and agility. You've witnessed this firsthand. What are the differences with the processes of product development and the technical aspect of it when it comes to bigger companies versus smaller companies?
Yeah, I think like first, naturally, teams have slightly different processes because they develop them independently. I think going through the process of understanding why they were developed the way they were, and also seeing the benefit of potentially having these slightly different processes, at least for a period of time, and maybe even going as far as like the acquiring company may learn something from the company they acquired and may adopt that rather than forcing whatever they've been using on that other company, because that, like, often the acquiring company is in the market for longer, so they may have more technical depth in their processes. It like has a longer history, but it may also have started when technology may have not been at the state it has been now. So I think there can be a lot learned from that. Likewise, on the process, I think what we've also went through is when it comes to product development, I think we had different approaches to this. I think one, PlushCare was or is a consumer brand, so we've been doing product development with the consumer mind and also with the kind of marketing mind, while Accolade has been more of a traditional enterprise company. And so, like, trying to marry that, like, not one or the other process is better, but you really need to look at what do you want to pick from each to come up with what works well for this combined company. And kind of that's what we're also going through now. And I think that will be like, and that's not unique to healthcare. I think you can apply that to any kind of company that is merging with another one.
Pretty cool. Awesome. And what's your take on the future of virtual healthcare? And do you think that in general, healthcare is slower to catch up with tech innovations? And if so, what do you think are the major contributors to that phenomenon?
Yes, I mean, I've been in health tech since 2005, and you're right. I think healthcare generally is slower to adopt new technology compared to other industries. Part of that is it is a highly regulated field. Also, obviously, patient safety is super important, as well as privacy, and often that collides with new technologies. But over the last few years, we've definitely seen a huge shift in healthcare, where like new technologies or like video conferencing, which probably wasn't a thing in or like at least wasn't widely adopted, has suddenly been widely adopted because of COVID. So sometimes you need a forcing function to really change like legislation and people's minds. And like in our case, like COVID really help people see the value in virtual care and how convenient it is that now, like, say you live in a rural area and you have very little access to high quality care. You either have to drive a long way, or simply it's not available to you, or you have to wait a long time to even see someone. To now being able to be connected with the expert in the field, no matter where they are located, in a very short amount of time. I think people start seeing that value now, and whether it is video, whether it is machine learning and AI, whether it is like big data processing.
Falko, what are your advice? What would be your advice for an early stage startup, an early stage business? You have a good eye of spotting companies that successfully transfer into public companies. So what do you think are the common denominators of the success, if we can view it from that particular aspect?
I think what I've seen, and kind of when I'm looking at a startup and looking at kind of where do I see them, I think it comes to, do they have like on the leadership, do they have someone who has deep knowledge in that field, and truly understands the challenges or the opportunities in that field, and then also have the connections or the knowledge of how to sell this service or product that you have to your potential customer. And like on kind of additionally having great execution skills, where with the little money you have, you try to get it as far as you can, and being responsible with it. I think in like it's I mean, not today, but like let's say last year, it was fairly easy to raise large amounts of money with a great
Mm-hmm.
idea. But I think what is difficult is like taking that money and actually launching a product and getting adoption without you constantly having to raise money again.
Good point.
So I think if I look at PlushCare specifically, we've only raised essentially 2 rounds and very little money in both of them, and we've been able to get to scale because we've been very diligent of how we use the funds we had. So I think that's really important, and also like just stay laser focused on your customer and the product that you have, and iterate, like not try to build the full solution at the beginning, because you may never get there and you run out of money before you have that, but really finding your MVP, and then iterate on it with clear goals in mind.
Falko, amazing points. I've enjoyed this so much. Thank you very much for being a part of this episode. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this as well.
Thanks for watching the part 2 of the CareMinds podcast episode with Falko Buttler, Senior Vice President of Engineering at Accolade. Hit the like button if you like this content. Please consider subscribing and hitting the bell notification. This helps the channel to produce more content like this. Consider leaving a comment below. Would be excited and thrilled to hear which topics in health tech, product development, and interoperability you would like us to cover next. Until next time.